together, like they playing.
Watching animals can be really interesting.
Fascinating.
It's fun for people of all
They
ages.
touching each other.
They must be a couple or something.
That's her son or daughter.
And she protected.
A comforter.
Observing animals helps us to learn about what they do and what they need to survive.
He probably be real mean and aggressive.
But you don't want them around. That's the way they play together. Y'all might think they fight, but they really play.
And observation skills are important for whatever you do.
It look like he said hello. He talking to them. Look like they thinking what to do next.
These are Atlantic bottlenose dolphins. You've probably seen them at a zoo or aquarium.
He trying to get away. Probably did.
Do it for exercise.
Ooh, he tried to fight
I think
him.
they playing.
They just kept on chasing each other and playing rough.
Like that, I think they playing right there. Because the way they do it, you can tell.
And the way
Well,
they
I can
just
tell
stop
by
them
the
from
expression on
going.
their face.
By the way they swimming in the water.
Have you ever tried to observe them and describe what they do?
Calvin bites and threatens Kaylee. Kai body slam and hit to Kaylee. Kaylee threatens Calvin. April threatens Kaylee. Kaylee threatens Allie and Topeko. Kaylee threatens Calvin.
Cindy Flaherty is a research assistant at Brookfield Zoo. She studies dolphin behavior at the zoo and in Australia, where she observes them in the wild. Cindy's work is having a major impact on dolphin conservation.
Allie and Topeko. And approaches Calvin. Calvin bite Kai.
Not all animals are as challenging to observe as dolphins. Let's try some animals that may be more familiar. Describe the behavior of this next group of animals. Now that you've had a chance to watch some animals, let's see what some scientists are doing and how they do it. Behavioral researchers ask questions about what animals do and why, and they observe animals in a systematic way to answer their questions. Some of the information they uncover can indicate changes in the well-being of a species or its habitat. This information lets us spot challenges and threats that certain species might be facing. It can also help us develop conservation plans for endangered species or habitats before it's too late. For instance, not too long ago, golden lion tamarins were on the brink of extinction. Scientists studied their behavior and ecology and learned how to breed and manage them in captivity. The knowledge we gained through behavioral observation helped us to help golden lion tamarins. These are golden lion tamarins who were born in a zoo and are now being reintroduced to their native habitat in Brazil.
I was fortunate enough to have the opportunity to research the golden lion tamarins out at Indian Lake in their soft release program. And the soft release program is an attempt to one day train the golden lion tamarins so that they can go back to Brazil and repopulate the wild population.
Well, all of us are very dependent on our environments, on the other members of our species in our environment and other species, and the changing aspects of the environment, changing weather, changing habitats. And so I try to understand the way that animals adapt to their changing environments and the way different animals and different parts of the natural world, including humans, interact with each other. But it's really important to tell individuals apart, and that's why that's the first thing we work on when we start with a new group, because it's only that. I both train students in the various places where I work and try to work with the local people and with those who study the changing environments to understand how we can, in a changing world, still maintain the wonderful biodiversity that we have.
I first got started in behavioral research when I came out to the Brookfield Zoo with my father on a Chicago alumni trip. And I was sitting over watching giraffes, and Jean was watching me observing the giraffes, and she noticed how intensely I was watching them. So she came over and spoke with my father, and she was asking if I would be interested in the job. And initially, I was just 15 years old. I really wasn't ready to be starting a career in behavioral science. And my dad talked with me later, and we thought about it, and I figured that that would be a good time for me. So I was interested in working with Jean Altman.
I've been working as an assistant with Dr. Amy Samuels for several years studying dolphin social behavior. We have projects here at the zoo, Brookfield Zoo, studying calf social development and monitoring basic relationships among dolphins. We also have a field site in Shark Bay, Western Australia, where we study juvenile dolphins. We are basically watching and trying to understand how dolphin kids grow up. One of the bonuses to being able to work at Brookfield Zoo with underwater viewing windows for viewing the dolphins is that we can develop techniques and practice techniques of studying dolphin social behavior here at the zoo and then apply them to the animals in the wild. When we're able to see through these windows, we can see complete interactions as well as subtle interactions, like how a simple change in body posture might result in a reaction from another animal. By becoming more familiar with these subtle cues to their behavior, it gives us a better hand at viewing the animals in the wild when we can only see them from above the water.
Other projects that I've participated in here at the zoo have included a study with the tree shrews in the Asian exhibit of Tropic World, the African monkeys and how the reintroduction of a new species affects their behavior, and the gorillas and how the introduction of a new dominant silverback male affects the group behavior.
When I worked for Jean Altman, I was doing behavioral research with yellow baboons from Amboseli National Park in Kenya. And basically, I was working with data entry and analysis and all types of proofing and working with the data.
I decided to do the mentor program because it was different from all the other summer programs. I did a study on the wood storks here at the zoo. The most interesting thing about my project was that I was actually doing something that helped the zoo, and that it wasn't busy work, and that I could actually see results after I was finished.
Well, I'm what's called a behavioral ecologist, and what I do is study the animal behavior and try to understand how it fits in with the environment that they're in. In my work, I mostly study mammals, and particularly monkeys, large monkeys, baboons. And these monkeys are particularly interesting because they live in very large, complex groups, just like a classroom or a large family group or a small town. And in these groups, they have to make a living in a very difficult environment out on the grasslands in Africa. And so I follow the monkeys around, and I've been doing that for about 30 years. So now I'm watching the great-grandchildren of the first monkeys that I watched.
We really feel that our efforts have made contributions to conservation issues and to the general knowledge of dolphin behavior, and that's a good feeling.
The best way to learn about animal behavior is to observe animals systematically.
You know, most of the time when we're in a situation and we're observing just as part of our daily lives, the kind of observing we do is usually, especially if we're untrained, it's what we'd call unsystematic.
So when a person watches an animal, they typically focus on what's most interesting to them or what's most obvious, the flashy behaviors.
But when we do systematic observations, what we do is try to get a better picture of what's happening most of the time or to most of the individuals and understand the rare behaviors and the behaviors of the quieter individuals as well, or the activities done in the quieter times.
So it helps to make you more systematic and causes you to pay attention to all the elements of their behavior as opposed to just being attracted to what's the most interesting thing going on in front of you.
Instead of just letting our background and what excites us the most or what's loudest catch our attention, we have ways to try to be systematic, try to plan, to try to get all the activities. And you do that either by scanning the group systematically and getting everybody, or if you want really the details of what's going on, you'd plan ahead of time to spend maybe 5 or 10 minutes with each individual. And you'd plan ahead of time, what do I think are all the important behaviors to answer the question I have?
Well, one of the benefits of learning systematic observation techniques is that it helps us to think through the whole context of a situation and to not bias what we are seeing or believing about an animal or a situation based on one event. So in everyday life, these types of techniques has helped me to be more aware of all the components that may be influencing a single event or a specific situation.
The most useful way to observe animals is to sample their behavior, either for a limited period of time or for brief intervals. Now, you're going to practice two of the most common methods for observing behavior, systematically and scientifically. One method of animal observation is called scan sampling. It's like taking a series of snapshots. You do it quickly and at predetermined intervals. For example, every 30 seconds or every 5 minutes. You always observe in the same direction or in the same order, then write down what the animal is doing at that instant. You can use this method to observe a single animal or a large group of animals. Remember, scan sampling is useful when you want to know how animals spend their time. These are meerkats in the Fragile Desert exhibit at Brookfield Zoo. They share their exhibit with a family of African crested porcupines, and Mike Brown is doing a research study on them. Mike is using scan sampling to observe the behavior of the meerkats. Every 30 seconds, he scans the group from left to right. On the behavior checklist, Mike writes down what the animals are doing, how many are playing, feeding, moving around, digging, and so on. He also makes a note of how many sentries he sees. A sentry watches for predators while the others do other things. Sentry behavior is important for survival in the wild. But since meerkats don't have predators at the zoo, researchers want to know whether they still exhibit this behavior. It's time to get out the ethogram and data sheet for the meerkat observation. You're going to use them to scan the meerkats every 30 seconds for 3 minutes, just as Mike is doing. Begin when you hear the beep. The other method of doing behavioral observation is called focal sampling or continuous sampling. Remember, focal sampling is like videotaping an animal. You write down everything the animal does and who it does it with: feeding, grooming, sleeping, mating, whatever. Focal sampling is a good choice when you're interested in social interactions. It gives you a complete record of what an animal did and with whom. These are white-cheeked gibbons from Asia. They live in family groups, and they're an endangered species, like most of the wildlife found in tropical forests. Sue Margulis is doing behavioral observations in Tropic World. Sue is observing the behavior of the gibbons and their new baby Malupre, the first offspring for this pair. This is the mom, Inda, and here's the dad, Benny. Sue is using Malupre as a focal animal, so she writes down everything Malupre does, including when he interacts with the other members of his group, in this case, Inda or Benny. Sue observes Malupre for 15 minutes at a time. Why don't you try observing the gibbons? Get out the provided data sheet and the ethogram. Remember, it's not easy. And it'll get even tougher as Malupre gets older. You'll be watching Malupre for 3 minutes. Begin when you hear the stopwatch beep. As you prepare for your field trip to the zoo, think about the observation methods you just learned. Use one or both of them to observe some interesting animals, including people. You'll be surprised by how much you learn, and you'll probably wind up with more questions than answers. But that's what science is all about. The scientists and students and volunteers you've met on this video know that their work is important to the well-being and long-term conservation of the animals they're watching. Observing animals is also a lot of fun for them, just as it can be for you.